Thanks, Simon. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarushen Pilay, and I head up our strategy and sustainability team in our energy business. So, unlike most of the Sasol people here, I wasn't a Sasol bursar, and I thought that was a good thing. I had a bursary from the Water Research Commission, and I've been in the sustainability field for almost 25 years now, right? But, and I never thought I would work for Sasol, because being a sustainability person, when I was at Varsity, I was one of the people that would stand outside NGen protesting there. And I thought, no, this is the enemy, right? I'm not going to work for Sasol. But when I started to understand what Sasol was doing and how committed they were to the transformation, the cutting edge, the best minds in the country were working on this problem. And yesterday somebody said, working at Sasol must be a chemical engineer's dream, right? But I can tell you, for a sustainability person, I mean, there's no better place to be. The challenge is big, but the opportunities are also massive, and that's what I really want to share with you. So I've been at Sasol now for this is my 18th year, and I've seen the progress every year, and the direction of travel, which is what I want to talk about today, is consistent, and we are moving in the right direction. We're moving at pace, and we're very, very focused on this subject. So yesterday I heard a lot of questions when I was interacting with you, where people wanted clarity on the roadmap. It's a very complex roadmap. Let's help us understand what the roadmap means. So that's what I want to talk a bit about today. And then I also heard concerns, 2030 is just around the corner, right? Are you going to make it? Can you deliver on our target? So I'll talk about our plans. And then what's next, right? Where's the future for Sasol after 2030? What products, what markets are you targeting, and how are you going to get there? And we're already starting to plant some of those seeds to open those markets up, and I'll share a little bit about that. And then how they say at the end, that's not all. So it's not just going to be about climate change and greenhouse gases. I'll talk a bit about some of the other things that we're doing in the sustainability field. So when we talk about our roadmap, we always say it's an integrated roadmap, greenhouse gas and SO2. And one of the things that Simon didn't show in the coffee cup analogy, the biggest thing that comes out of our boilers is CO2. So we emit SO2, particulates, NOx, all the air quality pollutants. But CO2, each boiler emits about 1 million tons of CO2. So by us turning down our boilers, that's where we see the biggest impact in terms of greenhouse gas. And that's why when we looked at this, we said, you can't take a singular approach to each environmental issue. You can't look at SO2, particulates, CO2, waste, and try and attack each problem individually. Because that is the traditional approach. Someone would say, okay, there's an SO2 standard, how do I meet it, right? Now I do something for SO2. Then there's a greenhouse gas problem, how do I sort that out? So when we look at it, we look at this in an integrated manner, because then we can harness synergies between the different environmental areas. And when I say synergies, it's really then it optimizes on cost. So I don't have to spend money on each problem individually. I can spend one set of, I look at this integrated roadmap, I spend the money and I address a number of pollutants. So when we do this roadmap, we then address greenhouse gases, SO2, particulates, NOx, our water usage comes down, our waste footprint drops. So it's really, and that's why we speak with so much conviction, because we sincerely believe that this is a much better solution that we're proposing, and we are confident that the minister and the rest of the authorities will buy into that. Now the other thing that I heard was, why is this roadmap changing all the time, right? And why don't you give us the milestones, show us, and then just go and execute? This is a very dynamic space, and we constantly optimize, looking at things like cost and economics, because we know that the roadmap is going to impact our economics. So we want to do this with the least value destruction possible for the business, right? So that's top of mind. We watch the capital. We then also watch the regulatory environment. What's happening on carbon tax, on our carbon budget? How does that space look, right? I said it's tied to our air quality, so we look at the impacts there. And then the biggest thing that could potentially change is technology. So, yesterday you heard Fleetwood mention biomass. We've been talking about hydrogen. We look at that, right? What are the other feedstocks? And I'll talk a little bit about gas, because we've changed our view on gas, and we mentioned it yesterday, where that market is also a dynamic and evolving market. So what's going to happen with feedstock supply? So we constantly monitor that, and then we adapt and optimize the roadmap to take that into account. That said, right, we can't sit here and optimize forever and a day. There are some things that are no regret moves that we have to move forward with, and we are implementing that. And I'll talk about it. The first one is our renewable project, and I'll give you some color on that. And then there are a few other things that we need to do to do that. But the bottom line is, and our CF they hold us very accountable, that capital range is fixed. I mean, and then we also then look at, because it's not just about capital, right? You can't trade off capital for expensive feedstocks or something like that. So we hold that very, very closely, that we stick to the capital, and then we stick to the economic value of the roadmap. Now let me just try and spend a little bit of time demystifying this roadmap, and hopefully I can simplify it, because we actually, and maybe it's because we are oversimplifying it. We think it's not as complex as people make it out to be. If you look at Sasol, our emissions, about half come from the process, half from the utilities block, right? And when we start, the governing factor for the roadmap is our boilers, because that's something that we can't get out of. We have to comply to the SO2. So on the top, your left is the boiler fleet. And what we are doing is we're turning down a number of our boilers to meet the SO2 load limit. When I turn down those boilers, what happens is then we reduce the amount of steam that the factory makes, because the boilers are used to make steam. And it achieves then an immediate reduction in CO2, SO2, all the other pollutants, right? So that is the heart of the roadmap. That sets almost the target that I can achieve by turning down the boilers. Now, when I turn down the boilers, it creates a couple of problems for me. The first thing is, the boilers were designed, or the Secunda facility was designed so that the boilers consume fine coal. Our gasifiers can only consume a limited amount of fine coal, and when you saw yesterday, you would have seen when the miners mine, the coal that is mined is a mixture of the coarse coal, which the gasifiers love, and then this very, very fine coal, right? And if you look at other miners who export coal, what they do is they stockpile their fine coal, because it's very hard to transport, it gets blown away. But what we did when the Secunda plant was built is that we said, no, let's use that fine coal. So we built a fleet of 17 boilers here, and we consume that fine coal to make steam and power. So it's built so that the facility is in balance, and all the coal that's mined, about 30% of it is fine coal. We can then use that fine coal. Now, what happens is, when I turn down 5 or 6 boilers, I sit with an imbalance in the fine coal, and I don't know what, I have to find a use for that fine coal. So what we've said is, we're going to take that fine coal and do what we call fine coal briquetting. So we take the fine coal and we bind it. We put it with mainly a cementitious kind of material. We make it into an agglomerate, and it looks like the briquettes that you used to grind, but much harder, much stronger. It's waterproof. It almost resembles coal. And it's in a condition that we can now put it back in the gasifier. So that's a very, very big part of our roadmap, and the roadmap capital, but also enabling the roadmap, because if I don't have a fine coal solution, then I can't turn down those boilers. So that's the first thing, right? The second part of the roadmap, so now I've turned down the boilers, I still sit with less steam in the factory. And I said we use the steam to make electricity and to run the process. So let's look at it in those two angles. I can either buy in more electricity, or I can change the demand, right? And the way we hold it is, we say, okay, we've signaled to the market, our current demand is about 600 to 700 megawatts. Our demand is going to go up to about 1200 megawatts. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to bring in more electricity, replace the electricity that we lose from the electricity we make on site, and we'll buy that in. But we don't want to just buy in the ESCOM electricity with a high emission factor. That's where the renewable energy comes in. So we're going to be chasing green electrons and bring as much of that in as possible. The second part where steam goes is into this big process unit, right? And this is where our biggest steam user on the site is our gasification units. About half the steam that this site uses, and you'll see it when you go on site, is used by the gasification unit. And we use the steam for a couple of things, but the main reason is to make hydrogen from steam, right? So we then start turning down our gasification, and that's where we start seeing a reduction in coal usage. So how do we make a reduction in coal usage, but also a reduction in production? And what we do is then we try and build that up with gas, increased gas usage. So there are a number of ways we can increase the production in this plant, and this is where we get very excited about things like biomass, green hydrogen, because if I can bring those alternate feedstocks in, then that helps me boost my production number, and it helps me save on other ways of reducing the total mix. So in a nutshell, the roadmap is very simple. It's the fine coal solution, it's some steam solutions, electricity solutions, and then levers to boost my production. So those are the key elements of the roadmap. I know the project teams will say, I'm oversimplifying it, and I am, but in a nutshell, that's what the roadmap is. Now, the thing about gas, right? So we were initially looking at reducing our coal to gasification and bringing in gas then to replace that production. And when we announced the roadmap in 2021, we looked at the gas market, and LNG was a very attractive option. We looked at the pricing, we looked at bringing it in the 40 to 60 petajoule range, and we said, okay, how does that look like? But the world has changed, and this is one of the signposts that we monitor. So part of the change was the cost of LNG, but for us to bring in that extra gas, we would need to build what we call 5 gas-heated heat exchange reformers. And we saw that capital also increasing. So as we normally do, we keep revising the economics, and we looked at it and we said, no, this is not an attractive option to pursue currently. And what we've done now is we've put that gas-heated heat exchange reforming GHHER project on hold. And if the market changes, we can bring it back. But as it stands now, we do not see additional gas as an option. What we are doing, and Fleetwood mentioned it yesterday, is looking at increasing the capacity from our own gas fields. So we still will bring more gas than what Secunda sees, the 60 petajoules that Simon referred to, because as we turn down coal, we create space in our reformers, and we can then boost the production from gas. So that's one of the key reasons why we want to retain our gas, use it as much as possible for our own use, and try and push up our production. So that's really the gas story. If I just give you a quick update on the progress on the levers, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because you've seen this before, but I want to give you comfort that we watch each of these levers like hawks. I mean, the renewable energy, Priscilla and her team meet with the regulator, they meet with ESCOM, they meet, if there are any bottlenecks, we have 2 weekly meetings to make sure that those projects are on track. Then, when we sign PPAs, it's not a passive, you sign the contract, you say you're going to deliver by 2025. That Msenge project, our teams are on site every month, checking, is this project actually on track? Are we delivering, and will that 69 megawatts come online? As the next project comes, construction, we send our project managers there, and we make sure. So that's how focused we are in terms of the milestones and the tracking and the delivery of the roadmap. So a couple of highlights. I think you guys know all of that, so I won't spend too much time on this. But suffice to say that the roadmap is got a lot of milestones, a lot of moving parts, but we are really pushing this hard. I spoke a bit about the signposts. I think for us, some of the key signposts are the regulatory environment. So what's going to happen with the carbon budgets, carbon tax, where's the country moving, where's the globe moving, what are our customers asking for, what's the market demanding, and then what's happening with our feedstocks. I mentioned biomass as an emerging feedstock, something that we want to watch closely. And then lastly, technology, right? The whole world is focused on this problem. Can we now bring in these emerging technologies sooner? So the direction of travel is still the same. We are going to reduce our coal demand, we are bringing in more gas, and we will look to see if we can bring in those sustainable feedstocks sooner rather than later. So it's something that we sit and there's a large team that works on it, and at the executive level, we debate it very, very regularly to see, can we adapt this roadmap? Now, the question is asked, so what next, right? What's after 2030? Because we know, the products that we make today are not going to be the products of the future. And one of the seeds that we've planted is related to green hydrogen. Hydrogen is a huge part of Sasol's business. We're one of the largest producers of hydrogen, grey hydrogen currently, and hydrogen is our business, right? We take carbon and hydrogen and we make all these synthetic products. So it's going to be a very, very important part of our future. And when we announced our strategy at the Capital Markets Day, we said, okay, in South Africa, we have to get this market moving, right? And we have to plant these seeds. We have to take a leadership role in getting the market moving. And just to give you an idea of the pace at which we move and the seriousness and how we committed. So we had our Capital Markets Day in September 21. I remember, Fleetwood, at that point you said, okay, so how are we going to produce our first hydrogen? We kicked off a project in Sasolburg in February 2022. In 24 or less than 24 months, it'll be about 18 months, we would have produced our first green hydrogen. This is not it's not a Mickey Mouse, a skid that we bought from overseas. This is a 600 to 700 million rand project that we went and implemented in Sasolburg, coupled with a big wind farm with on-site renewables. Initially, and we've had many surprises along the way. But for me, this is one of the successes, and it demonstrates that this is not just talk. We're not just sitting here and we're saying, let's think about it. We're actually doing something in this regard. But anyway, I'll let the people who actually did the work talk about it. So there's a 2-minute video of this.
Sasol's chlorine plant in Sasolburg is the first production facility in Sasol to produce green hydrogen. This became a reality when the solar photovoltaic plant on the Sasol Midland site in Sasolburg started to produce renewable energy in June 2023. Hydrogen is an essential input into the Sasol value chain, and green hydrogen has been identified as a key lever for achieving Sasol's long-term decarbonization goals.
March 1955 marked Sasol's journey to fossil fuels production on this very site where coal was used to produce liquids. A few years later, on the 30th of June 2023, we marked the first production of green hydrogen on a transition for Sasol to green energy.
Apart from the significance of what's been achieved here, one of the particularly noteworthy factors is the speed at which things were done. We managed to go from an idea being born to full completion within 1 year.
Sasol has a proud history of successfully implementing and integrating new technologies into complex petrochemical operations to produce liquid fuels and chemicals. By integrating renewable energy into Sasolburg operations, the opportunity exists to produce green hydrogen using existing processes and either converting this hydrogen into green chemicals or selling green hydrogen directly to customers. Although these green markets and applications are currently in their infancy, this will afford Sasol the opportunity to play a leading role in developing a hydrogen economy in South Africa.
So if anyone's in that area, it's a beautiful plant, right? You walk there and you see this field of solar panels, but it's also given us the confidence. A lot of you are asking, so why aren't you doing your own renewables on site? And this has shown because the PPA model is not the only model for us, right? We've got lots of land, we've got the abundant resource, and it's something that we're considering now. So nothing can be said about the roadmap and the transition without talking about the people. And Simon started, but we know that the transition is going to have an impact, and it's something that we take very seriously. It's very important to us. Yesterday at the dinner we spoke about us establishing this community, this town, and how it all came about. And we believe that this is our legacy, this is our responsibility, right? We can't just say, okay, we're transitioning out of coal, there's going to be 25% less miners, and this is how it's going to be. So in that regard, we've established this Just Transition Office, which is up and running now. And we are looking at partnerships. Some of them we've already put in place. And we're working towards a few pilot projects to say, okay, how can we transition our workforce? And we work very, very closely with the government on this one. So this is something that you'll hear more about in the coming years, because it's something that's super important to us and something that we take very seriously. And we work very well with our communities, our workforce. We keep them engaged to ensure that, like they say in the Just Transition, that no one gets left behind. So I'll leave it here because I think we in the coming years will share a lot more color in this regard. So just to end off, as I said, that's not all. We don't only focus on climate change. When we look at sustainability, we take this holistic approach, especially environmental sustainability, and we look at all the dimensions. And in that regard, we're also making good progress in some of the other areas. Biodiversity, you'll see this picture of the rhinos. I mean, I don't want to steal Kenneth's thunder because I know it's something he's very proud of, but I hope when we drive through the factory, we've got 12 rhinos there. I hope that their production tracks your production numbers, because we sit with 4 baby rhinos under 6 months. It seems like we got that production right there. But it's a good story. On biodiversity, I think we're one of the leading companies in South Africa, and we've been recognized for that, right? We take it very seriously. We look at our water footprint. Yesterday we spoke about water licenses for the mines, but we have a healthy engagement with the department. That wetland rehabilitation project, something we've worked with them, worked very hard, because we're reconstructing a wetland on the north side of the factory. It's about 80 hectares, and it's something that we collaborate with them. We work with them in Sasol to determine the standard. So it's a very, very good engagement that we have. We know we're one of the biggest water users in the country, second biggest industrial user behind Eskom, so it's something that's very important to us. We check our water usage, we focus on it, but it's again linked to the integrated nature of our roadmap. And the last one that we're very, very proud of is this biosludge to gasification. So part of our compliance journey will be recycling biosludge into our gasifiers, and it'll be our first demonstration where we say we're going to recycle waste to product. And it's something that our technology teams have developed over the years, and we've got it now as a reality. We've taken the FID, and Gerrit and his team are busy implementing that. So to conclude, what do I want to leave you with? The roadmap, I hope you have a better understanding of that, but it's very clear. But that said, there will be changes in the future. We're constantly looking at optimizing it, creating value, bringing in new technologies. How do I hold it, right? What is the world saying? Are we moving too fast? Are we moving too slow? Is there a better way of doing this? What are our governments saying? So that's how we look at the roadmap. We're planting the seeds for the future Sasol, and those shoots are starting to emerge. And lastly, this is a holistic environmental approach that we take. Climate change is the center because that's our biggest problem, but we look at all dimensions of sustainability. So I hope that's given you some clarity, some comfort in terms of what we are doing, and I really look forward to engaging with you with some questions now. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarushen. Quite a complex, interesting subject that you tried to push into a small box. Tiffany's already told me that I may find myself in a very familiar situation where I have to try to compensate for poor compliance upstream and make the most of it. So she's pushing me a bit. Can we go 2 slides down? Is it stuck? Oh, iDriving. Oh, okay, cool. So, before I start, maybe I was just... that's not a very good picture, so let's stick here. I need to just see if everybody's awake. How many accountants are in the room? Yeah, that's enough, quite enough. So I'm just going to tell you a small actual factual story from my past, and the accountants will definitely get this. The rest of the guys might be a bit challenged. So I went to town with my Hilux. I was living outside of town. And it was a number of years ago. And when I drove into town, I saw on the sidewalk a guy that I had attended matric with. Now, these guys these days don't know what matric is. That's actually when you get out of school, finally. But I immediately recognized him, and I honked the horn and I got out. And I saw he was getting out of a fantastic S-Class Mercedes, the latest model. Everything that opens and closes. And I was quite surprised because Philip Bronkhorst was, if he had ever made matric, he would have definitely been voted least likely to succeed. But he never got there because he gave up after his third failed attempt at grade 8. So I said, Philip, you're doing well for yourself, man. Are you driving somebody around? He said, no, that's my car. I said, so what is it you do? He said, no, I import. I've got a chain of clothing stores and I import, for instance, I've got suppliers in India that I buy a pair of pants for 10 Rand, and then you take that 10 Rand and then you add 3 times that, and the original 10 Rand, and I sell it for 50 bucks. And then I've got suppliers in China that I buy a suit for 1,000 Rand, and then you take that 1,000 Rand and you add 3 times that, and the original 1,000. So now I sell it for 5,000 Rand. You'd be surprised how well you can do with 3% profit. So that's what we're going for Fleetwood, is just 3% profit. So how do we do that? So the works that you're about to see today, it's almost like the blonde guy that was run over by the Uno. He afterwards said he thought it was a big car that was still far off. It looks small from a distance, but it's really huge, it's humongous, and it is highly complex, and it's folded back onto itself regarding the process in many places. So please ask any questions that you want of the people that are on the bus with you. It really is an opportunity to see something rather impressive. What we use on a daily basis is 100 kilotons, 100,000 tons of coal. And last evening I tried to explain to the people at my table what that looks like physically. You were at the mines yesterday. But if you take the dimensions of a typical soccer pitch and you assume it's more or less correct, 1 ton per cubic meter as a density of packed coal, then you divide that 100,000 by 100, which is the length, and 70, which is the width. And then you come up with a figure of about 14.5, don't you? The accountants will be with me still. And that means if you divide that by typically 4.3 odd meters per story, that's about 3.5 stories of coal on a soccer pitch every single day that goes through the gasification plant, through the works. It's a huge amount of feedstock. 245,000 cubic meters of raw water that we consume in a day, 120 million cubic meters of air that we use in the air separation units, which actually is a huge fridge that just cools down the air so that you can separate the nitrogen and the oxygen from each other, regasify the oxygen, and the oxygen goes into the gasification plant. I'll show you when we drive past that. 700 megawatts of electricity imported from the national grid. That's on top of the 600 to 700 megawatts that we generate ourselves in our boiler plant and in the gas turbines. That's more or less what Cape Town uses. 4.5 million cubic meters of natural gas on a single day. That comes in through the pipeline. We are an off-taker. The rest goes to the market and to Sasol. And that we use to generate 110 million cubic meters of synthesis gas. That's really useful stuff. The chemical engineers will tell you what you can do with that. 180,000 tons of steam at the boilers process and generation steam, and 520 megawatts of electricity from steam and gas turbines on average through the year. And with that, we produce 160,000 barrels equivalent in fuels. That's about 7.5 million tons per year. 40 to 60% fuels and chemicals. That's the split, depending on, of course, what the market does outside. Okay, so these are huge figures. How the plant is laid out is basically two factories. Maybe the next picture will show you that a bit better. Secunda West factory was built first, and Secunda East factory was built second. They used to be called Sasol 2 and Sasol 3, but then we broke down the wall. There was a physical wall between the two plants, and we integrated the management systems, and these days they're functioning as one complex with two factories, the West factory and the East factory. Each of those consists of two phases. So every year we shut down one phase on one of the factories. That's a quarter of the total production capacity. And every fourth time then we shut down a factory so that we can work on the commons as well. So in the old days, every 8 years. In the future, we will every 10 years do a total factory shutdown, which means 1/2 of the production capacity will be shut down for the period that we need to work on the common facilities. Then what do we do there? So on the left-hand side, pipeline gas, coal, water, oxygen, and steam are the major feedstocks. We use that in the process blocks in the center. Coal processing is where we split the coarse fraction and the fine fraction of the coal that comes across the fence. Coarse fraction goes to gasification, fine fraction goes to the boilers. At gasification, it's like a pressure cooker, really. I also tried to talk the table through it last night. It's really like a pressure cooker in which you effect a controlled explosion. So you use an oxidizer and oxygen, and you introduce high purity oxygen into the coal, which makes it want to explode, and then you just control that process by the steam that you introduce to cool it down, so that the water shift reaction gives you wonderful things like hydrogen and other valuable products that you split out in the rest of the facility. So after gasification, we have gas reforming, which makes the synthesis gas. We have natural gas conditioning of the other feedstock that comes from Mozambique. That has to be conditioned. You have to get the purity up, and that combined product then goes to the synthesis block, which is where we actually make the fuels. So you will see the old CFB reactors that look like McDonald's signs. Only one of them is really still operational. We have replaced them with the sexy new SAS reactors that Fleetwood built in his day. There are 10 SAS reactors that actually do the synthesis on the site. And then from synthol, it is split into the production plants that make phenolics, ammonia, and sulfur recovery. That's a gasification product. That's not a synthesis product. So that's also why pure gas from coal is more useful than natural gas from natural sources. So because of these products, phenolics, ammonia, and sulfur recovery, that you get out of the pure gas from coal. From the synthol plant, you go to refinery, chemical workup, where we split alcohols and carbonyls out, and then the poly and polypropylene plants that make valuable products. And on the right-hand side, we sell gases, chemicals, and fuels. Okay, at the bottom is just the utilities that make all of this possible. That's the safety view.
Welcome to Sasol Secunda. Sasol Secunda is the largest commercial coal-to-liquefaction plant globally. where we produce synthetic fuels, paraffin, diesel, and other specialized chemicals. Safety excellence is of critical importance to us. It is one of our key shared values and reflects the behavior we ask of our employees and visitors. Together, we strive towards sustainable zero harm because we care about our people, our operations, and our environment. Therefore, we ask that everyone entering the Secunda site act responsibly and adhere to our life-saving rules. Sasol is committed to minimize its environmental impact through the responsible management of raw materials, energy, waste, effluent, emissions, and compliance to permits and licenses. We are proud of our compensatory conservation efforts, which are directed to maintain and protect the biodiversity in close proximity of the Secunda plant. Firearms are strictly forbidden and must be handed to security for safekeeping. If you have a camera in your possession, please declare it at the security checkpoint. You may keep your cell phone and laptop with you, but please be responsible when using a cell phone on site as they are prohibited in certain areas. Please do not take any photographs unless you have written permission from your host. It is also important that you declare any tools and equipment in your possession that you want to bring onto the site. When driving on our site, please adhere to all road traffic rules and regulations. During your visit, you will be accompanied by a Sasol employee who will be your host. Please always stay with your host. Should you wish to have a drink, eat, or smoke, please do so in the designated areas. Smoking anywhere else is prohibited. As you walk around the site, you will see safety pictograms. Please take note as they are there to keep you safe. There are numerous hazardous chemicals and gases produced on site that can be harmful to you. If there's an emergency, you will be alerted by a specific alarm. One in case of a gas release and one in case of a fire. In the case of an emergency, your host will guide you to the nearest emergency assembly point. Emergency management services as well as world-class medical staff and facilities are always at hand. If you have a suggestion that may improve our safety standards or our performance, please share it with your host. Welcome to Sasol Secunda Operations.
Okay, I hope that was clear enough. Just briefly, when we do the site visit, we'll go in through the primary area or the secondary area gate. We'll quickly drive past the rhino enclosure so that you can see they're not just pictures. We've got them on standby. We'll just page them. We'll enter through the east gate. Quickly show you at the gas production plant what that control room looks like. It's actually called Nkandla because it's a little bit smarter than the rest of the control rooms. We didn't give it that name, it's the people on the site that give them these names. And then we will quickly show you, walk just past the gasification plant so you can see what the gasifier looks like physically. There are 84 of them, 42 per factory. They are pumping. And then we'll quickly take you across the road to the gasification or gas production GO, General Overall Workshop, where the team is very excited to show you what a grate with a channel breaker installed on it looks like and how it actually physically works. And if we have a little bit of time, they'll also show you what the reversible plow does. Because we can, these days with the reversible plows, we can turn the grate in both directions so that we can extend the lifetime. And thereafter we'll get on the bus and show you what the market and process integration central control room looks like in the middle of the plant that controls the process integration across the entire site. From there we will come back here. Thank you, Tiffany.